Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling one of the true cornerstones of literature, the epic poem Beowulf. This Old English masterpiece gives us a glimpse into a world of heroes and monsters and grand adventures, and I, for one, can't wait to unpack it all.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to think about the impact that this single poem has had, on literature and even on modern storytelling. It's such a story that's packed with action and symbolism, but it also provides a real window into the values and the anxieties of the people who created it.
And you gave us some great sources on Beowulf. It seems like the hero himself, Beowulf, is this incredibly strong and courageous warrior who travels all the way from Geatland to help King Hrothgar of the Danes. What motivates him to undertake such a dangerous journey?
Well, Beowulf, he's drawn to challenges, and Hrothgar is facing a pretty terrifying one, a monstrous creature named Grendel, who has been terrorizing the Danes' grand mead hall, Heorot.
Heorot sounds impressive. What's the significance of a mead hall in this context?
So mead halls weren't just places to feast and drink. They were really symbols of community strength and kingship. So Grendel's attacks on Harrow aren't just attacks on a building, they're attacks on the very heart of the Danish kingdom.
So Beowulf sails over to confront this Grendel, and they clash in this legendary battle. What makes this encounter so pivotal?
Well, first of all, Beowulf chooses to face Grendel unarmed. He relies solely on his strengths and courage.
It's pretty bold. But it's also incredibly brutal, especially the way that he defeats Grendel, ripping off an arm. That's a pretty decisive way to end a fight. What does that tell us about Beowulf's character or the values of the time?
It certainly highlights the raw power of Beowulf, and it perhaps reflects a culture that really admired physical prowess and ruthlessness in battle.
But the story doesn't end with Grendel's defeat, does it?
No, it does not. Grendel's mother, enraged by the death of her son, seeks revenge, and she's even more fearsome than Grendel, and her attack on Heorot is just as savage.
So Beowulf has to face another monster, and this time it's an underwater battle. What can you tell us about this second confrontation?
Well, it shows a different kind of courage, the courage to venture into the unknown. Beowulf tracks Grendel's mother to her lair, which is this murky underwater cave. So you see he's not just a powerful warrior, he's determined to protect those who have asked for his help.
Two monsters down, but the poem hints at another final challenge. Waiting for Beowulf, a fire-breathing dragon. What is it about dragons that makes them such compelling antagonists?
Well, dragons often represent chaos, or greed, or the destructive forces of nature. In Beowulf, the dragon guards a hoard of treasure, and its attack on Beowulf's kingdom can be seen as a symbol of the inevitability of conflict and the challenge of protecting what you hold dear.
Yeah.
And this dragon battle happens 50 years after Beowulf's victories over Grendel and his mother. So he's an older king by this point. And facing this dragon represents the ultimate test of his strength and courage, as he faces his own mortality.
It's interesting that the poem takes us on these detours, these kind of side stories that don't seem directly connected to the main plot. We've got the story of Sigmund, another dragon slayer, and the epic fight at Finnsburg. What can we learn from these diversions?
Well, I think those diversions really enrich the poem's world. They give us a much deeper understanding of the values and the beliefs of the Anglo-Saxon culture. The story of Sigmund, for example, might be foreshadowing Beowulf's own fate, suggesting that even the greatest heroes can fall.
Speaking of origins, the story of how this poem came to be is almost as fascinating as the story itself. We only have a single surviving manuscript, and the date of the poem's original composition is still debated. What can you tell us about this manuscript and the mystery surrounding its creation?
Well, the single surviving manuscript is known as the Knoll Codex, and it's thought to have been produced sometime between 975 and 1025 AD. But some scholars believe that the poem itself was composed much earlier, perhaps as early as the 8th century.
And to add to the intrigue, the Knoll Codex was damaged in a fire back in 1731. It makes you wonder how much of the original text might have been lost. Does the fact that we only have this one manuscript impact our understanding of the poem?
It certainly adds to the mystery and makes you appreciate just how fragile these links to the past can be. We have to rely on this single damaged manuscript to piece together the story and its meaning. And it raises questions, too, about whether there were other versions of the poem, and what those versions might have told us.
Another layer of complexity comes from the idea that Beowulf might have been passed down orally before it was ever written down. Can you tell us more about this oral tradition and the role of Skothics in Anglo-Saxon culture?
Sure. So Skothics were essentially poet performers, They traveled from court to court, entertaining audiences with tales of heroes and battles. Imagine a Scop reciting Beowulf, captivating his listeners with vivid descriptions and dramatic flourishes, adapting the story to suit the occasion.
It's fascinating to think about how the story might have evolved over time through this oral tradition. But the poem we have today also reflects a fascinating tension between the pagan world of Beowulf and the Christian beliefs of the scribes who wrote it down. How do these two belief systems coexist within the poem?
That's one of the most intriguing aspects of Beowulf. The poem is full of boasts, oaths of loyalty, references to fate and destiny, which are all hallmarks of pagan belief systems. But we also see hints of Christian thought, such as Beowulf's prayer to Father Almighty.
So what does that tell us about the people who created and preserved this poem? Were they trying to reconcile these different belief systems, or were they simply reflecting the complexity of their own time?
But that's a question that scholars continue to debate. It's possible that the scribes were trying to fit Beowulf into a Christian framework while still respecting its pagan origins. Or perhaps the poem reflects a world where these two belief systems weren't seen as mutually exclusive.
It makes you appreciate the poem's layers of meaning and how it can be interpreted in different ways. But for someone who's never ventured into the world of Beowulf before, it can seem a bit daunting. What advice would you give to a first-time reader?
I would say don't be intimidated. It's a powerful and rewarding experience. I'd recommend finding a good translation, one that speaks to you and makes the language more accessible. Seamus Heaney's translation is a popular choice, and it beautifully captures the spirit of the original text.
And you don't have to tackle the entire poem in one sitting. Take your time, read it aloud, and savor the language. It's like stepping back in time and immersing yourself in a world of ancient heroes and monsters.
Exactly. And you'll find that the themes explored in Beowulf are still relevant today. It's a story about courage, loyalty, the struggle against evil, and ultimately the acceptance of our own mortality.
So to wrap things up, what is the one big takeaway you want our listener to remember about Beowulf? Why should we care about a poem about a warrior from a distant land?
I think Beowulf reminds us that even though centuries separate us from the world of the poem, we share the same fundamental questions about good and evil and courage and fear, life and death. It's a story that continues to resonate with us because it speaks to the core of what it means to be human.
It's interesting that you mentioned the human experience. We seem to be hardwired to respond to stories about heroes battling monsters. Even in our modern, technology-driven world, we're still drawn to these epic battles. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it taps into something primal, something deep within our collective consciousness, We're drawn to the idea of good versus evil, of courage in the face of adversity. And these stories provide a framework for understanding our own struggles, our own inner battles.
So you're saying that even though we've traded swords and shields for smartphones and laptops, we're still fighting our own monsters, metaphorically speaking.
Absolutely. Those monsters might be fear or doubt, injustice, any number of challenges we face in our lives. And Beowulf reminds us that we all have the potential for heroism, that we can face our fears and fight for what we believe in.
And maybe by reading about these epic battles, we can learn to confront our own inner demons and find the strength to overcome them.
Precisely. Beowulf's journey is a reminder that even the greatest heroes face moments of vulnerability. It's not about being invincible. It's about having the courage to keep fighting, even when the odds are stacked against you.
Well said. And that's the beauty of a deep dive like this. We've uncovered so much more than just the plot of an old poem. We've explored history and culture and even our own human nature.
And that's what makes Beowulf such an enduring masterpiece. It's a poem that continues to challenge and inspire us, inviting us to grapple with big questions and find our own meaning within its epic narrative.
And that idea of finding our own meaning, of connecting with these timeless themes, that's something we hope you'll keep thinking about as you continue to explore the world of Beowulf.
Happy reading. And remember, there's always more to discover, more to learn, and more to ponder.
Until next time, keep your curiosity burning bright and never stop diving deep.